Mr. Guillaume Massin.
Thank you. Thank you. Just before starting, just a quick introduction on DFDL, who we are and what we do. We are a legal tax investment advisory firm. We've been working in Cambodia and in the region for the past 22 years. Cambodia since 1995, as well as Myanmar. In Cambodia, we work as a legal and tax advising firm. We provide, to some extent, advisory, consulting services, and as well as legal services in collaboration with a Cambodian firm, Sarin and Associates. We've been focusing on the Mekong region, and our main objective as advisors was over all these years to help bringing investment to these countries where at the beginning infrastructure was not that developed, where you had difficulties finding relevant advisors or consultants to help developing. So we started in the core Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar part of the region, and then we developed into the more sophisticated part. We tend to cover mainly ASEAN at the moment, but we also have an office in Bangladesh. These are the areas of expertise that we have, and we principally advise corporations, investment banks, developers. We also have individual clients, but we principally work on as a corporate M&A advisory type of consultancy. We also have taxation. We also provide taxation services. The presentation today, I've asked during the break, I was wondering, who do we have as part of the audience? We have developers, we have retailers, we have individual investors. Seems to me that we have mainly individual investors. So the presentation will focus on what you may ask, the question you may ask yourself when you want to enter a market like Cambodia, in order to feel safe, in order to see whether you will be comfortable making that investment, what type of investment, how to do it. I will touch base on a few questions also. I think we'll keep the questions for the end of the presentation during the panel discussion. You might not get everything during that presentation as to how exactly you can acquire property in Cambodia as an individual buyer or investor. But of course, feel free during the panel discussion to ask further question or detailed question on very specific aspects of investment or procedures or legal issues or tax issues if you need to. The first thing, where are we in Cambodia? Where do we stand in terms of the market? How Cambodia is connected to ASEAN? What is the key perspective of development of Cambodia at the moment? I think Mark earlier already touched base on a few of these questions. Just the main aspect that we have in mind when we present Cambodia is highly connected. Highly connected because it's in the middle of ASEAN. You have China pushing up, coming through the southern corridor to make investment in the region. Cambodia is right in the middle. It's now highly connected not only because of its position, geographic position, but because of the infrastructure and the commercial trends between all these countries. Cambodia is part of ASEAN, of course. Cambodia has, since 2003, joined WTO. So the main trade commitments that you would expect to see, and of course Singapore, you will know what this means, in a country where you want to invest, Cambodia has made these commitments. Of course, in terms of implementation, there has been a sort of a timeline where Cambodia has had to work on its regulatory framework to make things go better, and now is more up to speed. Definitely, there are still some efforts to be made. There are still some projects to be implemented in terms of legal developments, but definitely it's on track. It's also, and as part of that, rather open economy and flexible market. We quite often say that Cambodia is part of ASEAN in terms of doing business, the ease of setting up a business in Cambodia or going to Cambodia to make an investment. Cambodia is probably one of the easiest places and markets to deal with in the region. The figures that we usually see in terms of how it ranks, this is ease of doing business. Of course, investment comes after that. But just so you see how it's ranked, that's the latest business survey by World Bank. Although it's been criticized, it gives you an idea of how it stands compared to the other countries of the region. It's basically compared to where you see Myanmar, you see Laos. Cambodia is a bit further advanced. Of course, there's been a few changes here, notably for Thailand over the past year. But Cambodia, in the end, has one of the most flexible and open economy in the region compared to all these countries. It translates into different areas where, of course, there's room for improvement. But in the end, I think there are a few graphs that are missing here. Maybe in the presentation, in the format, it didn't actually go. Yeah, a few things missing. But this is basically how Cambodia stands on a scale compared to Singapore on the World Bank doing business scale. There are a few areas. So you see, there's of course a lag here, where you might say, or we might say, that Cambodia is 20, 30 years away from Singapore in terms of development. They are, if we compare not the scale, but the areas where things are missing now, we will principally focus on getting credit, which is still a problem in Cambodia for the consumer base, and maybe enforcement of contracts here. If you compare to, so you might not be able to see really well, to compare to Myanmar and Vietnam, for instance, Cambodia is basically, if you do a sort of mapping of where we are, it's basically a mix of Vietnam and Myanmar, just average between the two. Now, as for the investment environment, talking about the legal framework is usually quite technical, so I'll be quite quick on this one. But just to tell you, basically the main features that you need to make sure you feel safe, but also to make sure that you don't have too many restrictions as an investor, or even if you want to do business. Cambodia has developed since '92. It reopened. It made a choice to actually rebuild entirely its legal framework. It was a tough decision, and maybe not the best decision, but it's continued actually developing laws and regulation based on a new system, entirely new system, since 1992. And in 2003, when Cambodia accessed WTO, it made a commitment to implement nearly 100 laws, new laws, to make the legal framework better developed. And it probably implemented already 2/3 of these new laws. So you have most of the features that you need. You have a company law, you have a civil code, you have a civil procedure code, you have a criminal code, you have a court system that is maybe not the best system or the best organized system in the region, but it works. It is more developed, more transparent than it was before, and it's getting there. In terms of doing business, you can incorporate a company in Cambodia quite quickly. It would take you 2 to 3 weeks. You would not have, as an investor, you would not have restrictions to invest in Cambodia, except if you want to buy land, and that's something that we'll further discuss after that, as a foreigner. But otherwise, for most sectors, if you want to invest, or if you want to to develop a business, for instance, you would be able to do it as a foreigner without limitation. We usually say that in Cambodia you have an investment law. In Myanmar you have a foreign investment law. In Cambodia the investment law applies to everybody in the same way. You don't have a distinction between a foreigner or a Cambodian business person or Cambodian investor in the investment law. The main features are that foreign lending is possible. You can get, including in Cambodia, financing for your project. As an individual, you will get it as quite a high rate. Interest rate vary from 10 to 13% in Cambodia. So you would not, of course, coming from Singapore, go straight to a Cambodian bank. You cannot own land, but you can either lease land or you can enter into a joint venture with a Cambodian partner to buy land. But if you want to buy apartment, you can buy apartments as under strata titles as a foreigner. And there is now, since it's been announced last week, a double taxation treaty with Singapore. So it will give you a cap on tax rates, 10% cap. And as a Singapore investor or Singapore business person, it will give you an advantage on the other investors in the region. You would get taxed only 10% when others would get taxed 14% on a withholding tax basis. The local environment, business environment, of course, there are still some areas that are of concern, but to compare with the countries, the other countries in the region, it's not that significant. I would put it this way. Corruption is still a weak strength according to World Bank. Laws and regulation and their enforcement is also listed as an area of weakness. But in the end, you would also have a better availability of materials, a cheaper cost of labor, some custom procedures and cost that would be also more affordable than in the other places in the region. Attractions and challenges, very liberal, as I was saying. There's no real foreign ownership restriction except for land. You can hold a USD account in Cambodia. You would have to declare yourself as a resident, but even if you're not residing 182 days per year, you can still hold an account. You will have to update your status with the bank, and the bank will have to allow you to keep that account, but it is possible. You will not have to have a permanent resident status. You can fly in Cambodia, apply for a business visa. There's no, in Cambodia, there's no link between a work permit and a business visa at the moment. You can still get a business visa without having to obtain a work permit. You would have to get a work permit later on if you want to stay in Cambodia. It's not fully enforced at the moment, but you can still renew your visa as you want. And you would not have restriction if you want to have a tourist visa and enter Cambodia every 6 months. You go every 6 months. You don't have to worry about being the application rejected because you were there 6 months before. Tax incentives are quite flexible, although Cambodia seems to be a bit back compared to, for instance, Vietnam and Myanmar, which have new investment laws. But Cambodian government is also working on an update of the investment law, so it should provide more flexibility. The latest update was 10 years ago in 2003, 13 years ago. And they will obviously release a new update quite soon. Dispute resolution is something that is quite often raised as a question by investors. How can you protect your investment? How can you litigate? You have local courts. You also have commercial arbitration, local arbitration in Cambodia. The Singapore International Arbitration Center has helped setting up the Cambodian Arbitration Center. The rules are quite similar. It's quite new, so we can't say that it really works yet. But on the other hand, international arbitration is recognized, and international arbitral awards can be enforced in Cambodia. It has been tested already. Challenges, still some key laws to be drafted, transparency issues, cost of infrastructure, human resources, access to human resources are usually the main challenges that are raised about Cambodia. Which sectors and what's going on in Cambodia? I think Mark has already raised a few points, but we principally see that there are three main sectors, the types of sectors in Cambodia, and basically speed of development or status of development for these sectors. There, you have sectors that are already completely developed or saturated. That's the case for financial services. You have 43 banks in Cambodia, which is a lot, of course, mainly based in Phnom Penh. Telecommunication sector also completely developed and saturated. You have sectors that are less saturated, which have already reached a certain stage of development, and we're talking about tourism, where there's obviously a lot of potential. Siem Reap is the key destination for Cambodia, tourism in Cambodia, but the coast also. And you also have now a lot of residential developments on the coast that have started, including by Singapore developers. And it's quite interesting to see how things are progressing there. Talking about the coast, we're talking mainly about Sihanoukville. Energy is a sector where we see more and more operators. Things are going to be more open, and tariff, although quite high, will be probably negotiable on the basis of the new investment law. Real estate is a sector also that is rather developed, but still a lot of room for development and new types of development. We're talking about Cambodia is mainly a residential market for real estate at the moment. You see a few mixed-use projects. You see a few high-rise buildings. Most of the projects that are been discussed today are service apartment, office buildings. But it really started with mixed use. It really started with gated communities back in 2005, 2007. The office building and apartment building type of project have only really developed recently. And I will tell you why. At the moment, the way Cambodia is developed, you don't have really zoning requirements, real estate, for real estate projects. You don't have a construction code. Things are really new. So the market is a bit under-regulated, so still really accessible, really open for investment. Why has these projects mainly only developed recently? The project that you see here and outside, simply because the laws did not allow for strata titling or co-ownership regulations for office or residential buildings before 2009. So before 2009 in Cambodia, you couldn't buy a unit in a building as a foreigner. It's relatively new, so it's only mainly available for new projects. Everything that was built before 2009 usually cannot be divided into units and sold as co-owned or strata titles. There might be exceptions, but we are talking about mainly new buildings. So for those who want to buy, it's possible to buy older properties in Cambodia, but it would be more difficult to buy them as a foreigner because you would not be able to access that strata title type of legal document that you need to purchase property. A few points on the different sectors. So residential, we really started freehold titles are available to foreigners since 2009. And we're talking about buildings where you can, as foreigners, you can buy 70% of the units based on the total floor area. 30% of units need to remain in the hands of Cambodians. The title you would get, Cambodia has a national titling system, so you would get a land title, you get, sorry, a unit title that will be separate from the land title. But you would not have rights, as a foreigner, you will not have rights to the ground floor. You will you will not have rights to the common areas. These rights will only be given to the Cambodian owners. There are limitations to foreign ownership. In addition to that, there are some areas where you cannot buy, but it's principally around the borders. You have 25 kilometers setback from the border where you cannot buy as a foreigner in a co-owned building. There are also a few things you will need to know when you buy. You need to verify that the developer you're buying from has the proper development license. It's relatively new in Cambodia since 2009, 2010 that these licenses are a formal requirement. There might still be some developers who don't have that license. And even if they are in the process of obtaining the license, it's still something that is quite important for you to know. And the reason why is because you can only be protected as a customer, as a buyer, if the developer has that license. The developer, if they're doing pre-sales, the developer will have to put a deposit at the National Bank of Cambodia as a guarantee for the customers, and he will have certain thresholds to comply with in terms of disbursements from his developer account, and that can only be controlled if he has the relevant license. So that's quite important, and that's one of the few things that you will need to verify before committing to buy property in Cambodia. There are a few developments that are expected. Housing development is a law that is going to be passed by the Ministry of Economy and Finance, and that's going to focus on new forms of financing for housing development, of course mainly for the local market, but it would be quite interesting to know how they structure that draft. It's only in the first instances of development, and we know that the Cambodian government sent a delegation to Singapore to actually study different forms of investment based on that. Draft law on construction and some additional rules for registration. Office building is more or less the same thing. You want to buy a unit in an office, you can do it as a foreigner, same requirements as in a residential building, but actually there's no real distinction between a residential building and an office building because the regulations were drafted back in 2009 mainly for residential buildings. So you will still be able to do it. You will still have the same form of documents. You will have a developer, real estate developer with a license. You will have co-ownership regulations, but essentially they would look like the documents that you would get for a residential building. So it looks a bit strange, but there's a flexibility for the developer to adapt the legal documents to the type of development that he's doing, but it's on the same basis as for a residential building. Retail shopping mall, there's no specific framework for that. There are a few developments, recent development, the biggest one being the Aeon Mall in Phnom Penh. These developers are usually free to lease space. There's no restriction on leasing space to foreigners. There's no restriction on operating different types of business within their premises. So it's generally a very free environment. Industrial, for those who are interested, but the legal framework here is something that's been implemented for quite a long time. Basically, in Cambodia, the way you develop industrial projects, you would register your company, you will seek government incentives which are called, it's fall under the investment law, which under the qualified investment project license, which would give you a investment period where you would have a tax holiday, which can go up to 9 years, with a profit tax exemption, corporate tax exemption, and custom duty exemptions as well. Hospitality is a sector also that is regulated under specific licenses, but there's no restriction. So if you would like to invest in a project where whether you're talking about a fund, we're talking about a rate, we're talking about your own project you want to develop as a hotel project, it would be open in Cambodia. You don't have restrictions for foreigners. And similar to industrial development, it will fall under a scheme of investment incentive, same, the QIP incentive, with some tax deferrals, tax holidays. We see a few projects in Cambodia, and there's a good reason for that, which are developed based on residential part. You have a residential part of the project and hospitality part. Because as a residential developer, the developer will not be able to get tax incentive. Whereas as a resort developer, a hotel developer, they will be able to get incentive. So usually you see mixed projects, residential and hotel. Just to finish the presentation on a few on the ownership structures. These are usually the most common question that we get. So you can purchase freehold as foreigners only in buildings which have titles, co-ownership titles, which are the starter titles that we've discussed before. 70% limitation, so you can buy up to 70% from the first, for the second from the second floor up. First floor would be and ground floor need to be Cambodian owned. And you will be able to lease also in this building, and you will be able to lease to foreigners or to sell to foreigners without restrictions. But for land, it's completely different. If you want to buy land, you will have, usually you have 3 options to control land in Cambodia. Either you buy through a Cambodian national, but we do not recommend nominee structures. So you would have to buy through a Cambodian company. That's the option here. Or you will lease long term. You can lease up to 50 years. And you can register the lease in the title documents at the land office. Cambodia has a national land registry. So every lease for title property will be registered in this land registry. Mortgage is also registered, so you will know before buying a property whether it has been leased, whether it has been sold, whether it's been subject to a mortgage, which is, for instance, compared to Laos. In Laos, you cannot check properties really in the land registry. You cannot access the land registry. In Cambodia, you have a formal process to do a land search or a title search. So these are the 3 options. Investors usually choose that option, which is the incorporation of a landholding company. So it works like a joint venture. You have a 51% Cambodian shareholder. You have a foreign shareholder. To some extent, the foreign shareholder can control the economic interest in the company. There are some legal instruments that can be entered into to do that. Mainly, we're talking about contractual arrangements. And that's a bit sophisticated, but if any of you are interested, I can further develop that after, if you have questions during the break. Recommendations. That's the main thing probably. If you have anything, only one thing to remember about this presentation is this. These are the main steps you have to go through if you want to buy property in Cambodia. We're talking about any property. We're talking about land. We're talking about apartment. First, the property check. You check the title, and that can really only be done by a qualified lawyer. You cannot ask a real estate agent to do that. So you will need to go through a local lawyer to do that. Property check, checking the title with the land office. Search on encumbrances, search on restrictions, search on defects of the property. License check, verify the license of the developer. The developer should be able to give you a copy of his license. Licenses need to be renewed every year or every 2 years, so you should be able to give you the latest update. And if the license is due to be renewed, they will be able to show you that they have filed the application to renew the license. You also need, that's quite important as a recommendation, to have the sale purchase agreement. Usually when you buy a unit in a building, you would have three types of documents. Sorry. One is a letter of intent, so you would book the property, you will have to pay a deposit. 2 is a sale purchase agreement. And 3, the management or co-ownership regulation. The co-ownership regulations are usually quite standard, and they are filed with the Ministry of Land Management, so at least you can verify it's a formal document. But the sales purchase agreement is a private document, and this we always recommend to have it verified by a lawyer. Terms of payments, but also risks, reps and warranties are quite important to be checked, and that SPA would have to be notarized. It's a requirement in Cambodia. You might waive that requirement, but it's actually better to have it, because if you need to enforce against the developer, the fact that the SPA is notarized will give you more certainty. We're talking about really having a notary public stamping on the document, which also means that it would be better for you, because you can only notarize documents in Cambodia, to actually sign the SPA in Cambodia. You can also sign it in Singapore, but it's better to sign it in Cambodia. So you will have to go there to do it. Payment terms, there's one technique that is quite often used in Cambodia, which is quite flexible, and it's actually quite a common practice, is having funds in escrow. Meaning funds with a bank, not with a real estate agent. Real estate agents usually don't have insurance to do escrow services. So you can have an escrow agent, either a professional escrow agent, a notary, notaries can do it, or a bank. So you would actually put the money in Cambodia if you need, to actually disburse the various installments. And you would do that based on certain milestones. So whenever the property, whenever you've reached a certain level of development, or there's a milestone triggered by the contract, then the funds would be disbursed. Titling, and that's something you might not be able to control completely, but if you have a lawyer, he can do that for you, to make sure in the first instance that the property, if you're buying a title, you're buying whether for office or apartment, that the property can be titled, because the titling of the property does not occur from the beginning. It's only at the end, after 80% completion of the construction, that the property can be titled. And sometimes, we've seen, unfortunately, a few projects where the documents, the construction permit, has not been done in accordance with the titling regulations. So everybody thinks that the building is complete and it can be titled, but actually it can't. And in the end, you're buying a unit, but you don't have a title. That's a check that you can do very early in the process when you do the title check, property check. Sometimes there's no title if you're buying pre-sale, but you can at least verify that a title can be issued, that all the project documents from a developer are actually good enough to get you to receive a title in the end. Thank you.